He walked quietly across the lobby, head bowed low, pushing the janitor's cart as if apologizing just for existing in a skyscraper built of glass and ambition. Where million-dollar contracts were signed behind soundproof doors, there was a man nobody noticed. A man invisible in a world of brilliance. And yet it was him, Sean Flores, who did the impossible. Because the little girl everyone in the building feared, the daughter of billionaire Amanda Gutierrez, was untouchable. That girl, Isabel Gutierrez, had once been the smile of the entire empire. Now there was only silence. 8 nannies had come and gone. Therapists had given up. She screamed when treated with kindness, cried when anyone touched her, and locked her heart behind invisible walls. Until one seemingly ordinary afternoon, Sean was mopping the marble floor near the elevators when he heard a soft sob behind a column. He stopped, set the mop aside, and walked closer. Then he knelt down slowly, carefully, as if afraid to break something fragile. From the pocket of his shirt, he took out a small object, something that looked ordinary but somehow made the whole world stand still for a few seconds. And then, miraculously, the girl stopped crying. No one in the company knew what had just happened. No one knew that the man pushing the cleaning cart had once been a wonderful father until he lost everything. And Amanda Gutierrez, the powerful woman she was about to witness something that would change her life forever. But before we discover what happens next, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Now let me tell you how Sean Flores ended up being the only person who could reach a broken child's heart. On the 30th floor of Pierce Global Dynamics in the heart of Manhattan, the glass walls reflected the light of the entire city below. In a silence so deep she could hear her own heartbeat, Amanda Gutierrez stood motionless, eyes fixed on her computer screen. On it was the 9th psychological report about her daughter Isabel. Patient completely rejects strangers. Severe PTSD symptoms. No response to cognitive behavioral therapy. No response to play therapy. Psychiatric intervention recommended. Suggestion: short-term hospitalization. Amanda slowly closed the laptop. Not again. The words blurred on the screen as her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Not here. Not in this office where she commanded boardrooms, negotiated billion-dollar mergers, and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. Here, Amanda Gutierrez was unbreakable, invincible, but the report in front of her told a different story, a story of complete and total failure. At 41, the CEO of a $3.2 billion biotech empire, a woman who commanded 2,000 employees, negotiated with governments, and made decisions that affected millions of lives, now stood powerless before a 7-year-old child. Her corner office on the 30th floor was a monument to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unobstructed view of Manhattan's glittering skyline. The mahogany desk had been custom-made in Italy. The chairs were designer originals worth more than most people's cars. Awards lined the walls: Forbes 40 Under 40, Businesswoman of the Year, Pioneer in Biotech Innovation. Framed magazine covers showed her face, confident, powerful, unstoppable. But none of those accolades meant anything now. Amanda walked to her private bathroom, marble floors, gold fixtures, a shower she never used because she was always too busy to need one during office hours. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. Dark brown hair pulled back in a perfect sleek bun, not a strand out of place. Black designer suit tailored to perfection. Diamond earrings that cost $30,000. Makeup applied with precision by a personal stylist every morning at 6 a.m. She looked the part. The successful CEO, the woman who had it all, but her eyes told the truth. Dark circles that no amount of concealer could fully hide. a tightness around her mouth from clenching her jaw through too many sleepless nights, and in her dark brown eyes, usually so sharp, so focused, there was something she'd never seen before. Defeat. Amanda splashed cold water on her face, ruining her makeup. She didn't care. What was the point of looking perfect when her world was falling apart? Since the day Richard Gutierrez, her husband, her daughter's father, and the family's anchor, died in a plane crash 3 months ago, Isabel had become a shadow of herself. Those eyes, only 7 years old, carried a hollowness most adults would never dare to face. Amanda walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, pressing her palm against the cold glass. 40 stories below, Manhattan pulsed with life. Yellow cabs weaved through traffic. Pedestrians hurried along sidewalks. The world kept moving, indifferent to the fact that hers had stopped the moment 2 officers appeared at her door with the news that Richard's private plane had gone down over the Atlantic. No survivors. She'd handled it the way she handled everything, with control, precision, and an iron will. She'd made the calls, arranged the memorial service, spoke eloquently about Richard's legacy to a room full of investors and colleagues. She'd been the picture of strength. But Isabel hadn't been strong. Isabel had shattered. And 3 months later, Amanda still didn't know how to put the pieces back together. 3 months earlier, Isabel had been the light of this office. She ran into her mother's room holding a drawing made with crayons. "Mom, look, I drew us. 3 people. You, Daddy, and me." Richard laughed, lifted his daughter into his arms, and spun her around. "Do you know your mom is the smartest woman in the world?" "I know," Isabel giggled, "but Daddy's the best." Richard had gasped in mock offense. "The best? Just the best? Not the most handsome? The funniest? The strongest?" Isabel had squealed with laughter as he tickled her. Okay, you're the best at everything." "That's better." Richard had set her down gently, then looked at Amanda with those warm brown eyes that had made her fall in love with him 15 years ago. "What about you, Mrs. Gutierrez? What do you think?" Amanda had smiled, walking over to wrap her arms around both of them. "I think we're the luckiest people in the world." And she'd meant it, every word. That was 3 months and a lifetime ago. Their laughter filled the room back then. Now only the hum of the air conditioner remained, and the cold scent of printer paper. The framed photos still sat neatly on the shelf, but the life inside them was gone. Amanda picked up the silver frame on her desk. The photo showed the 3 of them on a beach in the Hamptons last summer. Richard's arm around her shoulders, Isabel building a sandcastle at their feet, all 3 of them smiling like nothing could ever go wrong. She remembered that day with painful clarity. It had been August, brutally hot, but the ocean breeze made it perfect. Isabel had insisted on building the biggest castle ever, and Richard had gotten down in the sand with her, not caring that he was wearing his expensive swim trunks. They'd worked on it for 2 hours, building towers, digging moats, decorating with shells. "Mom, come help," Isabel had called out, her little face beaming with joy. Amanda had been on a conference call, sitting under an umbrella with her laptop. "In a minute, sweetheart." But the minute never came. The call went long. By the time she hung up, Richard and Isabel had finished the castle. It was lopsided and imperfect, but Isabel was so proud. "Look what me and Daddy built." Isabel had run over, sand covering her purple swimsuit. "It's beautiful," Amanda had said, barely glancing at it before diving back into her emails. She'd been so focused on work, always so focused on work, and now she'd give anything, every dollar, every award, every achievement, for one more day building sandcastles with her family. But things did go wrong. Things went catastrophically, irreversibly wrong, and now Amanda was left trying to be both mother and father to a child who wanted neither. The plane crash had happened on a Tuesday. Richard had been flying to Boston for a charity event, something for underprivileged children, because that was Richard, always helping others, always seeing the good in the world. The Cessna Citation X had gone down 40 minutes after takeoff. Mechanical failure, the preliminary report said. The plane had broken apart mid-air. There were no survivors, no bodies recovered, just debris scattered across miles of dark Atlantic water. Amanda had been in a board meeting when she got the call. Her assistant had knocked, pale-faced, and whispered that there was an emergency. 2 NYPD officers waited in her office. She'd known immediately. Known it in the way your soul knows when the worst has happened. She'd walked into her office on steady legs, shook the officers' hands, listened to their carefully practiced words of condolence. And when they left, she'd sat at her desk and stared at the photo of Richard and Isabel for 3 hours without moving. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't call anyone. She just sat there, watching the sun set over Manhattan, feeling her heart turn to stone. The therapy room had cost over $100,000 to build. Amanda had hired the top child psychologist in New York to design it. Dr. Eleanor Marsh, who'd written 3 books on childhood trauma and appeared on Good Morning America twice, had personally selected every element. The walls were painted in soothing sage green. The lighting could be adjusted from bright and energizing to soft and calming. There were sensory toys, sand tables, stress balls, textured fabrics. Art supplies filled 3 entire shelves: watercolors, crayons, modeling clay, finger paints, a reading nook with oversized pillows, and a carefully curated selection of children's books about grief and loss. A small indoor trampoline for kinetic emotional release. A puppet theater for narrative therapy. Even a miniature Zen garden with tiny rakes. Everything evidence-based. Everything scientifically proven to help traumatized children heal, and none of it worked. In the far corner, Isabel sat curled up in the fetal position, clutching an old doll, the last gift from her father. It was worn now, one arm loose, stuffing coming out. Richard had bought it for Isabel on her 6th birthday, just over a year ago. It was a handmade doll from a small shop in Soho. Nothing fancy, just a simple cloth doll with button eyes and yarn hair. But Richard had let Isabel pick it out herself, and she'd chosen this one immediately. "This one, Daddy." She looked sad. "She needs someone to love her." Richard had smiled. "Then she's lucky you found her." Now the doll was falling apart. The dress was stained, the yarn hair was tangled. One button eye hung by a thread. Amanda had tried to have it repaired, had even offered to buy Isabel a new, nicer doll. But Isabel had screamed so loudly the security guards came running. The doll was all she had left of her father, and she wouldn't let it go, just like she refused to let anyone touch her. "Isabel, sweetheart." Amanda knelt down slowly, maintaining what the therapists called a non-threatening distance. She kept her voice calm, modulated, exactly as she'd been coached. "Today we're going to meet a new doctor, Dr. Sarah Chen. She's very nice. No!" The scream tore through the room like a knife through silk. "I don't want any doctors. I don't want nice people. I want Daddy back." Isabel's face contorted with rage and grief. Her dark brown eyes, Richard's eyes, blazed with an anger no 7-year-old should know. The doll flew across the room and hit the door with a soft thud. Amanda froze, her hands trembling. She wanted to rush forward, to gather her daughter in her arms, to hold her until the pain went away. But every time she'd tried that in the past 3 months, Isabel had screamed louder, hit harder, retreated deeper. A woman who could run a global empire, who'd negotiated with pharmaceutical giants and government regulators, who'd fired executives twice her age without flinching, didn't know how to hold her own daughter. "Isabel, please, get out!" Isabel grabbed a stuffed elephant, a birthday present from Amanda last year, and threw it at her mother. "Get out! I hate you! I hate everyone! I want Daddy!" The words hit harder than the elephant. Amanda stood slowly, her legs shaking. Okay, sweetheart. I'll be outside if you need me." Isabel turned her back, curling even tighter, making herself as small as possible. Amanda walked out, closing the door quietly behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. The child had built a wall around herself. Brick by brick, scream by scream, she'd constructed a fortress where no one could reach her. And no matter how powerful Amanda Gutierrez was, no matter how many billions she commanded, no matter how many experts she hired, she couldn't find the door in. She couldn't save her own daughter. For 3 months, she had tried everything. Everything money could buy, everything experts recommended, everything desperate mothers do when they're watching their children disappear. The first nanny, Mrs. Martha from the Pemberton Agency, came with impeccable credentials. 25 years of experience with high-profile families, references from senators and celebrities, a calm, grandmotherly demeanor that was supposed to be comforting. She lasted 4 days. On day 4, Isabel had locked Mrs. Martha out on the penthouse balcony and hidden the key. Amanda had been in a meeting. By the time she found out, Mrs. Martha had been outside for 2 hours, pounding on the glass, her face red from crying. Isabel sat on the couch inside, watching her with empty eyes, not saying a word. "I can't do this," Mrs. Martha had said when Amanda finally let her in. "That child is disturbed. She needs professional help, not a nanny." The second nanny, Lisa Chen, specialized in special needs children. She had a master's degree in child psychology and had worked with autistic children, children with severe behavioral disorders, children who'd experienced trauma. She was patient, skilled, and came highly recommended. She lasted 6 days. On the 6th morning, Lisa woke up to find that Isabel had cut off a chunk of her hair while she slept. Not a little, a whole handful from the side of her head, leaving a bald patch the size of a fist. Lisa had screamed, waking up the whole apartment. Isabel stood in the doorway of Lisa's room, holding the scissors, expressionless. She didn't even look sorry, Lisa had told Amanda, her hands shaking. She just stared at me, like I was nothing, like hurting me meant nothing. The third nanny, Gabriela from Brazil, lasted 3 days. She quit after Isabel poured an entire bottle of shampoo into her shoes. The fourth, Patricia, made it to day 5. She quit after Isabel told her in perfect detail that she hoped Patricia would die in a car crash, just like her daddy died in a plane crash. The fifth nanny didn't even make it through the first night. She walked out at 2 a.m. after Isabel had spent 4 hours screaming non-stop. The 6th, 7th and 8th nannies each lasted less than a week. Amanda stopped remembering their names. What was the point? They all left anyway, and the therapists were even worse. Dr. Morrison from Yale, specializing in childhood grief, had come with a sterling reputation. He'd written papers, given TED Talks, appeared on CNN as an expert. Amanda had paid him $500 an hour. For 5 sessions, Isabel sat in his office and didn't say a single word. Not one. She just stared at the wall while Dr. Morrison tried every technique in his considerable arsenal. Play therapy, art therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. Nothing. "Your daughter is choosing not to engage," he'd told Amanda after the 5th session. "I can't help someone who won't accept help. I'm sorry." Dr. Chen, a PTSD specialist who'd worked with war veterans and trauma survivors, lasted exactly 1 session. The moment she walked into the therapy room and tried to introduce herself, Isabel started screaming, not crying, screaming, a high-pitched animal sound of pure terror and rage that didn't stop. Isabel screamed for 45 minutes straight. Her face turned red, then purple. She hyperventilated until she nearly passed out. Dr. Chen tried everything, soft voice, giving space, leaving the room, but nothing worked. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Gutierrez," Dr. Chen had said, visibly shaken. "I've never seen a reaction this severe. Your daughter needs inpatient psychiatric care. This is beyond what outpatient therapy can address." Every professional after that wrote the same line in their reports. "This child needs time, or a miracle." But Amanda Gutierrez no longer believed in miracles. She believed in control, in strategy, in solutions. She'd built a $3 billion company by solving impossible problems, but her 7-year-old daughter was a problem she couldn't solve, and it was destroying her. Her phone rang. The voice of the HR director came through, cautious yet tense. "Mrs. Gutierrez, the board is becoming concerned about your personal situation. Your recent absences from meetings could affect—" "I know," Amanda cut her off. "I'll handle it." But the truth was, she didn't know where to start. The board meeting last week had been a disaster. Amanda had been presenting the quarterly earnings report when her assistant interrupted. Isabel's school had called. Another incident. Isabel had bitten another child. Amanda had excused herself, promising to return in 15 minutes. She hadn't returned at all. By the time she got to the private elementary school on the Upper East Side, Isabel was sitting in the principal's office, blood on her mouth, eyes vacant. The other child, a boy named Marcus, was crying in his mother's arms, a bite mark on his forearm already turning purple. "Mrs. Gutierrez," Principal Davidson had said, his voice carefully neutral. "This is the third violent incident this month. We've tried to be understanding given Isabel's situation, but we have to think about the safety of the other children." Translation: one more incident, and Isabel would be expelled. Amanda had taken Isabel home, tried to talk to her, asked her why she'd bitten Marcus. Isabel had just stared at her with those hollow eyes and said, "He was laughing. Nobody should be laughing." That night, Amanda had returned to the office at 9 p.m. to find an email from the board chairman. Subject line: "Concerns regarding leadership stability." The email was diplomatic but clear. The board was worried. 3 missed executive meetings, 4 cancelled investor calls. 2 major contracts had fallen through because Amanda hadn't been present to close the deals. The company stock was down 12% since Richard's death. Analysts were starting to ask questions. Competitors were circling. "We understand you're going through a difficult time," the email read, "but Pierce Global Dynamics needs a CEO who can be fully present. Perhaps it would be wise to consider a temporary leave of absence until your personal affairs are in order." A leave of absence. Polite corporate speak for "fix your life or we'll replace you." Amanda had deleted the email without responding, yet the woman who once controlled the world was losing the one thing she could never replace: her daughter, and maybe her company too. That night, Amanda sat alone in her office. Outside, the city gleamed like molten gold reflected on the cold glass. On her desk lay an old folder, wedding photos of her and Richard, pictures of baby Isabel, snapshots from their summer trip to Italy last year. Richard's voice echoed in her memory, deep, warm, gentle, like a distant melody. "You know, Amanda, you can be better than anyone else. But what I love most about you is how you love Isabel without ever needing to prove it." She smiled faintly, a trembling smile like a crack in flawless glass, because now she was failing at both, being a great CEO and being a whole mother. When the first tear in 3 months fell onto the desk, the lights of Manhattan shimmered in her eyes, as if the entire city were crying with Amanda Gutierrez. 6 a.m. The old apartment complex in Queens still lay shrouded in damp, cold darkness. The building was one of those pre-war walk-ups that should have been condemned decades ago. Peeling paint, broken mailboxes, a front door that didn't lock properly. The kind of place where nobody asked questions and nobody cared who you were or what you'd lost. The alarm had rung at 5:30. Sean Flores shut it off and sat up without turning on the light. He was used to the dark. It had been his only loyal companion for years. 38 years old, but he looked at least 10 years older. Silver streaks touched both temples, premature grey that had appeared in the months after Ethan died. His deep brown eyes held lines etched by sleepless nights and long years of loneliness. His face was lean, almost gaunt, the face of a man who forgot to eat more often than he remembered. The apartment was small, studio technically, though that was generous. 400 square feet of worn linoleum floors and water-stained walls. A kitchenette with a mini-fridge, a hot plate, and a sink that dripped constantly, no matter how many times he tried to fix it. A bathroom so small he could barely turn around. And in the main room, a twin mattress on a metal frame, a small table with one chair, and a dresser with drawers that stuck. It wasn't much, but it was all he needed, all he deserved. He walked into the next room, technically just a closet, but Sean had converted it into a shrine, a small, empty space. Just a single bed that had belonged to Ethan, still made up with the same Spider-Man sheets from 6 years ago. A small desk where Ethan used to do his coloring, and photos taped to the wall. So many photos. Pictures of a little boy at every age from newborn to 5. Ethan as a baby, bundled in a blue blanket, eyes squeezed shut. Ethan at 2, covered in spaghetti sauce, grinning with 4 tiny teeth. Ethan at 3, dressed as a dinosaur for Halloween. Ethan at 4, riding his first bike with training wheels. And Ethan at 5, straw blonde hair that stuck up no matter how much you combed it. A missing front tooth he'd lost 2 weeks before he died. Blue eyes clear as the June sky, full of trust and innocence and love. Sean stood still for a few seconds, as if reluctant to leave. Every morning he stopped before the largest photo, Ethan's school picture from his last year of preschool. Ethan, smiling that gap-toothed smile, hugging a stuffed dog named Buster. "Good night, my little boy," he whispered, even though the sun was just rising. It was what he'd said every night when he tucked Ethan into bed. "Good night, my little boy. I love you. Sweet dreams." And Ethan would always reply, "Good night, Daddy. Love you too." Now Sean said it to a photograph. It was the only conversation they had anymore. Then he quietly closed the door, carrying that familiar weight in his chest. A heaviness that had never gone away. That would never go away. Guilt, grief, the unbearable knowledge that his son was dead and he was still alive. 6 years earlier, the small apartment had once been full of laughter. "Daddy, look, I built a castle." 5-year-old Ethan sat in the middle of the floor, surrounded by a riot of colorful Lego bricks. The castle leaned slightly, ready to topple, but in his eyes it was a whole kingdom. Sean knelt down, smiling, and pulled his son into his arms. "It's beautiful. My boy's a genius architect." "You mean it, Dad?" "I mean it. You can be anything you want." "Then I'll build a castle for you to live in." "For me? Why is that?" "Because you deserve it. You're the best dad in the world." Sean said nothing more. He just hugged his son tightly, fighting back tears. He didn't know it would be the last time he heard that laugh. Now, in the packed subway car, Sean sat silently in a corner, wearing his navy blue janitor uniform. The Clean Core Solutions logo on his chest was frayed. People barely glanced at him. He was invisible, and he preferred it that way, because 6 years ago, Sean Flores had been someone else entirely. He'd been a project manager at a construction firm, middle-class income, a small house in the suburbs, a wife, Laura, and Ethan, his son, his world, his reason for waking up every morning. Then, in one terrible moment, it all shattered. It was a Saturday in June. The kind of perfect summer day that makes you believe good things last forever. Blue sky, warm sun, birds singing. Sean had promised to take Ethan to the park, the big one with the swings and the slide and the sandbox. "We'll build the biggest sandcastle ever," Sean had told him at breakfast. "Bigger than my Lego castle. Way bigger." Ethan had been so excited he could barely eat his pancakes. But then Laura had asked Sean to run an errand first, pick up groceries for the barbecue they were hosting that evening. Sean said yes. He always said yes to Laura. "I'll be quick, buddy," Sean told Ethan, ruffling his blonde hair. 30 minutes, max. Then we'll go to the park right after. We'll have the whole afternoon." "Promise, Daddy." "Promise." Ethan had held up his pinky finger. Sean had hooked it with his own. "Pinky promise." But Sean wasn't quick. The grocery store was packed, everyone shopping for their weekend barbecues. The parking lot was full. The aisles were crowded. He'd forgotten the list Laura gave him and had to call her twice. The lines at checkout stretched back to the frozen food section. By the time he got through checkout, loaded the bags into the car, and drove home, 45 minutes had passed. He'd broken his pinky promise. When Sean walked through the front door, arms full of grocery bags, he heard Laura screaming. Not angry screaming, terror screaming, the kind of sound that stops your heart. He dropped the groceries. Milk exploded across the floor. He ran. The bathroom. The door was open. Laura was on her knees, soaking wet, pulling Ethan out of the bathtub. The water was still running. Ethan's body was small, so small, limp in her arms. His lips were blue. "He's not breathing," Laura was screaming. "He's not breathing." Sean's training kicked in. He'd taken a CPR class years ago when Ethan was born. He took Ethan from Laura's arms, laid him on the bathroom floor, and started compressions. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. "Come on, buddy, come on, breathe." Laura was on the phone with 911, her voice hysterical. Sean kept doing compressions, his hands on his son's tiny chest, pushing, counting, breathing into his mouth. "Please, Ethan, please, Daddy's here, just breathe." But Ethan didn't breathe. The paramedics arrived 8 minutes later. They took over. They had equipment, oxygen, a defibrillator. They worked on him in the bathroom, then carried him to the ambulance. Sean and Laura rode with them, holding hands, praying to a God neither of them really believed in. At the hospital they worked for 20 more minutes, but Ethan was gone. Time of death, 2:47 p.m. Cause, drowning, accidental. The doctor explained it gently. Laura had put Ethan in the bathtub while she answered a work call, an urgent call from her boss that she couldn't ignore. Just 5 minutes, she'd thought. Just 5 minutes. Ethan was 5 years old enough to sit in the bath alone for 5 minutes. But Ethan had been playing with a toy boat. He'd reached for it when it floated to the far end of the tub. He'd slipped, hit his head on the side of the tub, fallen under the water, unconscious. Just 5 minutes. That's all it took for Sean's world to end. The autopsy said drowning, accidental, no one's fault, legally, no criminal negligence. Just a terrible, terrible accident. But Sean and Laura knew the truth. Laura had left him alone in the bath. Sean had broken his promise to be back in 30 minutes. If he'd been home, he would have been watching Ethan. Or they'd have already been at the park. They'd both failed him. And the guilt consumed them like acid, eating them from the inside out. Laura left 6 months later. She couldn't stay in the house where it happened. Couldn't sleep in the bed she'd shared with Sean. Couldn't look at Sean without seeing Ethan's blue lips, his lifeless body. "I can't do this," she'd said, her voice flat, emotionless. I can't be in this marriage anymore. I can't be in this life. She'd moved to California, started over, new job, new apartment, new life. A life where she didn't have to remember every single day that she'd killed her son. And Sean couldn't look at himself in the mirror without wanting to disappear. So he did. He quit his job, sold the house, moved to a tiny apartment in Queens, took the first job that didn't require talking to people, janitorial work. And for 6 years he'd lived in the shadows, punishing himself for the sin of surviving when his son didn't. The subway stopped. Sean stood and walked out into the cold Manhattan morning. The glass tower of Pierce Global Dynamics loomed ahead, gleaming in the early light. He entered through the service entrance, nodded to the security guard, and took the freight elevator to the 30th floor, the executive level, where the powerful made their empires, where Sean Flores mopped their floors and emptied their trash. He started his rounds, vacuumed the conference rooms, wipe down the glass walls, empty the bins, refill the soap dispensers, invisible work, done by an invisible man. But that afternoon, everything changed. It was 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday when Sean heard it. He was mopping the marble floor near the executive elevators on the 30th floor, going through his routine with the same mechanical efficiency he'd perfected over 6 years. Dip the mop, wring it, sweep in overlapping figure eights, move forward, repeat, don't think, don't feel, just work. Then he heard it, a soft, broken sound, like a wounded animal trying not to be found. A sound he knew intimately because he'd made it himself 1,000 times over the past 6 years, late at night when there was no one to hear. The sound of a child crying while trying desperately not to cry. Sean stopped. The mop handle froze in his hands. For a moment he considered walking away. This wasn't his business. He was just the janitor. Other people, important people, qualified people, were paid to handle crying children in executive offices. But he couldn't walk away. He set the mop aside, resting it carefully against the wall, walked slowly around the large marble column near the elevator bank, following the sound. And there she was. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, curled up on the floor in a small space between the column and the wall. Dark brown hair fell over her face like a curtain, hiding her. She was clutching a worn doll with both hands, holding it so tightly her knuckles were white. Her small body shook with silent sobs, the kind where you're crying so hard you can't make sound anymore, just gasping for air between shudders. Sean's breath caught. For a moment, just a flash, he saw Ethan, same small frame, same way of curling up when upset, same desperate attempt to make yourself invisible. But this girl had dark hair, not blonde, brown eyes, not blue, a purple dress, not the superhero shirts Ethan had loved. This girl wasn't Ethan, but she was someone's Ethan, and she was broken. Sean stood there for a long moment, unsure what to do. The smart thing would be to find someone who worked here. Tell them there was a crying child. Let the professionals handle it. But he couldn't leave her alone. He just couldn't. He knelt down slowly, carefully, about 3 feet away. Not too close. He knew from his grief support group that traumatized people needed space. He sat back on his heels, making himself smaller, less threatening. He didn't speak. Didn't reach out. Just waited. After what felt like an eternity, the girl looked up. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. Dark brown eyes that should have been full of childhood joy, but instead were hollow, empty, dead. Eyes that had seen too much, lost too much, hurt too much. Sean recognized those eyes. He saw them in his own mirror every morning. "Are you okay?" Sean asked quietly, knowing it was a stupid question. Obviously she wasn't okay, but he didn't know what else to say. The girl didn't answer, just stared at him with those empty eyes, like she was looking through him at something beyond. Sean thought about what to say. What could he say? That it would be okay. That was a lie. That she'd feel better soon. Another lie. That her life would go back to normal. The cruelest lie of all. He reached into his shirt pocket. His fingers found the small object he always carried. A tiny Lego brick. Yellow. A single 2x4 brick from the castle Ethan had been building the day before he died. Sean had found it weeks after the funeral, under the couch. He'd broken down crying, holding that tiny piece of plastic like it was made of gold, and he'd carried it every day since, in his pocket, over his heart, a reminder of what he'd lost, what he'd failed to protect. He held it out in his palm, the yellow brick resting in his rough, calloused hand. "My son used to build castles," Sean said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "Lego castles, huge ones that took up half the living room. This was his favorite piece. He said yellow bricks were magic, that they could make anything strong no matter how broken it looked." The girl's eyes fixed on the yellow brick. She stared at it like it was the only real thing in the world. "He said, if you put a yellow brick in the foundation, the whole castle would be strong," Sean continued. "Even if the walls were wobbly, even if the towers leaned, the yellow brick would hold it all together." A tear rolled down the girl's cheek. "My daddy's gone." The words were so quiet Sean almost didn't hear them. But he did, and they hit him like a punch to the chest. Sean's throat tightened. "I know. My son's gone too." The girl looked up at him with those hollow eyes. "Does it stop hurting?" And there it was. The question Sean had asked himself every single day for 6 years. The question he'd asked the grief counselor, the support group, the therapist he'd seen for 3 months before giving up. The question everyone wanted answered, and no one could answer honestly. Sean wanted to lie, to tell her, yes, it gets better. Time heals all wounds. One day you'll wake up and it won't hurt anymore. That's what all the books said, what all the professionals said, what everyone said, because they didn't want to admit the truth. But looking at this little girl with her dead eyes and her broken heart, Sean couldn't lie. "No," he said honestly, his voice breaking. "It doesn't stop. The pain doesn't go away, but you learn to carry it, like a backpack. Some days it feels heavy, so heavy you can barely stand. Other days it feels a little lighter. You can walk, you can breathe, you can almost pretend you're okay, but it's always there." The girl nodded slowly, like she understood, like she was relieved someone finally told her the truth instead of pretty lies. "Everyone keeps telling me it'll get better," she whispered, "but it doesn't. It just gets harder to pretend." "Yeah," Sean said. "Yeah, that's exactly right." They sat in silence for a moment, two broken souls recognizing each other. "I'm Isabel," she whispered. "I'm Sean." Isabel looked down at the yellow brick in his hand. "Can I keep this?" Sean hesitated. That brick was all he had left of Ethan, the only physical piece of his son he carried with him. Giving it away felt like losing Ethan all over again. But looking at this broken little girl, seeing the first spark of interest in her dead eyes, he knew what Ethan would want him to do. Ethan had been kind. Even at 5 years old, he'd been the kid who shared his toys, who invited the lonely kid at the playground to play, who cried when he saw sad commercials about shelter dogs. Ethan would have given Isabel the brick without hesitation. "Yes," Sean said, his voice thick. "You can keep it." He placed the yellow brick carefully in Isabel's small palm. She closed her fingers around it slowly, like it was made of glass, like it was the most precious thing in the world. And for the first time in 3 months, since the day 2 officers came to her penthouse and told her mother that Daddy's plane had crashed, Isabel smiled. Not a big smile, not a happy smile, just a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. But it was there. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the brick to her chest along with her worn doll. Sean stood slowly, his knees aching. "You're welcome, Isabel." He picked up his mop and walked away, leaving the girl sitting there, holding the yellow brick like it was a lifeline in a storm. And for the first time in 6 years, Sean felt something other than guilt and grief. He felt purpose. What Sean didn't know was that Amanda Gutierrez had been watching the entire exchange from her office window. She'd seen her daughter, the child who screamed at therapists, threw things at nannies, and refused to speak to anyone, smile at a janitor. And in that moment, Amanda knew. This man, whoever he was, had just done what 8 nannies and 6 therapists couldn't. He'd reached her daughter. The next day, Sean was called to Amanda's office. He'd never been to the executive floor beyond the hallways he cleaned. Standing in front of the massive glass door with Amanda Gutierrez, CEO, engraved in silver letters, Sean felt out of place. A secretary waved him in. The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, sleek furniture, awards on the walls. And behind a massive desk sat Amanda Gutierrez. She was younger than Sean expected, early 40s maybe, sharp features, dark hair pulled back, eyes that could cut through steel. "Mr. Flores," she said. Her voice was calm but commanding. "Please, sit." Sean sat in the chair across from her desk, feeling like a child called to the principal's office. "I saw what you did yesterday," Amanda said, "with my daughter." Sean's stomach dropped. Was he in trouble? Had he overstepped? "I'm sorry if I—" "Don't apologize." Amanda's expression softened slightly. "You're the first person in 3 months who's made her smile. The first person she's spoken to willingly." Sean didn't know what to say. Amanda leaned forward. "I need your help." "My help?" "My daughter is broken, Mr. Flores. I've hired the best nannies, the best therapists, the best everything money can buy, and none of it has worked. But you, a janitor I didn't even know worked in this building, you reached her in 5 minutes." Sean looked down at his hands. "I don't know what I did. I understood what she was feeling." "How?" Sean hesitated. Then, slowly, he told her. About Ethan, about the accident, about the 6 years of grief and guilt. When he finished, Amanda was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I can't imagine what that's like. I wouldn't wish it on anyone." Amanda stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "I'm failing her. I run a billion-dollar company, but I can't help my own daughter. I don't know what to do anymore." "You love her," Sean said. "That's what matters." Amanda turned to look at him. "Is it? Because love hasn't been enough." Sean thought about that, about all the nights he'd held Ethan, all the promises he'd made. Love hadn't been enough to save his son. But maybe— "Love isn't supposed to fix everything," Sean said quietly, "but it's supposed to be there when everything else breaks." Amanda's eyes glistened. She blinked quickly, composing herself. "I have a proposal," she said. "I want to hire you, not as a janitor, as Isabel's companion, friend, whatever she needs. I'll pay you whatever you want. Just please, help me reach my daughter." Sean stared at her. "You want to hire me to spend time with a 7-year-old? "Yes. I'm not a therapist. I'm not qualified. You're the only person she's responded to. That's qualification enough." Amanda's voice was desperate now. "Please, Mr. Flores, I'm begging you, help me save my daughter." Sean thought about Ethan, about the castle they never finished building, about all the moments he'd lost. He couldn't save his son, but maybe he could help save this little girl. "Okay," Sean said. "I'll try." And that's how Sean Flores, a janitor haunted by guilt and grief, became the unlikely guardian angel of a billionaire's broken daughter. Over the next weeks, Sean's life transformed in ways he never expected. The first week, he just sat with Isabel in the therapy room for 30 minutes every afternoon. Amanda had cleared his janitorial duties during that time. The other janitors covered his floor. Sean showed up at 2:30 p.m., knocked softly on the therapy room door, and sat cross-legged on the floor across from Isabel. They didn't talk much at first. Isabel sat in her usual corner, clutching her doll and the yellow brick. Sean sat against the opposite wall, giving her space. Sometimes he'd tell her small things about Ethan. Sometimes Isabel would show him a drawing she'd made. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, two people who understood that sometimes there were no words for grief. On day 3, Isabel asked, "What was your son's name?" "Ethan." "Was he nice?" Sean smiled, his eyes filling with tears. "The nicest kid I ever met. He cried when he saw sad commercials. He shared all his toys. He told me once that his job was to make people smile." "My daddy was like that," Isabel whispered. "He always helped people, even people he didn't know." "Sounds like your dad was pretty great." "He was the best." Isabel's voice broke. "I miss him so much it feels like my chest is breaking." "I know, sweetheart. I know." The second week, Isabel started talking more. She told Sean about her father, how he'd read her bedtime stories every night, how he'd made funny voices for all the characters, how he'd let her put clips in his hair and paint his nails, how he'd promised to teach her to fly a plane when she was older. "He said I could be a pilot like him," Isabel said, tears streaming down her face. "But now I'll never learn." "Your dad would want you to learn anyway," Sean said gently. "When you're older, if you still want to fly, you should do it. For him. But it won't be the same without him." "No, it won't. But Isabel, nothing will ever be the same. The world changed the day your dad died, and you can either hide from the new world or you can live in it. Living in it doesn't mean you forget him. It means you carry him with you." Isabel thought about that. Then she picked up a Lego brick from the pile Sean had brought. "Will you help me build a castle?" "I'd be honored." They built together. A small castle at first, just 4 walls and a tower. But Isabel insisted the foundation had to have the yellow brick in it. "So it's strong," she said. Sean showed her how to build stable walls, how to create arches, how to make towers that didn't fall over. They worked side by side, and for those 30 minutes, Isabel almost looked like a normal 7-year-old girl, not happy, not healed, but present. The third week, Isabel laughed for the first time. Sean had been telling her about the time Ethan tried to build a Lego spaceship but accidentally built something that looked more like a duck. "He was so proud of his spaceship," Sean said. "And when I told him it looked like a duck, he said, 'No, Dad, it's a space duck. It goes to the moon and says quack.'" Isabel had giggled, a small sound quickly stifled, like she felt guilty for laughing, but it was there. "It's okay to laugh," Sean said gently. "Your dad would want you to laugh. But it feels wrong, like I'm forgetting him." "Laughing doesn't mean you're forgetting. It means you're still alive, and that's what the people we love want for us, to keep living, even when they can't." By the 4th week, Isabel was waiting for Sean by the elevator every day at 2:25 p.m., 5 minutes before their session. She'd run up to him when he arrived, grab his hand, and pull him to the therapy room. "Come on, Sean. I started a new castle and I want to show you." The change was miraculous. Amanda watched from her office window, tears streaming down her face, as her daughter, her broken, traumatized, unreachable daughter, came back to life. Isabel never asked why Sean understood her pain. She just knew he did, and that was enough. Slowly, piece by piece, the wall around Isabel's heart started to crack. She laughed at Sean's terrible jokes, and he had a lot of them, all dad jokes he'd saved up from Ethan's childhood. She showed him her drawings, pictures of her father, pictures of Ethan in heaven. She'd decided they were friends up there. Pictures of the three of them building Lego castles. She told him about her father, and Sean told her about Ethan. Two broken souls, healing each other, and Amanda watched it all from her office, her heart breaking and mending at the same time. She saw her daughter come back to life, and she saw something else too. Sean Flores wasn't just saving Isabel, he was saving himself. The way he smiled when Isabel laughed, a real smile, not the polite professional smile therapists gave. The way his eyes lit up when Isabel showed him something she'd built. The way he talked about Ethan now, not with the crushing guilt that had defined him for 6 years, but with love and fond memories. Isabel was giving Sean permission to remember the joy, not just the pain. And Sean was giving Isabel permission to keep living, even though her father couldn't. They were saving each other. 6 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon in March, Isabel ran into her mother's office without knocking, something she hadn't done since before Richard died. "Mom! Mom! Look!" She was breathless, her dark brown hair flying behind her, her eyes, those eyes that had been dead for so long, sparkling with life. Amanda looked up from her laptop, her heart leaping. Every time Isabel smiled now, it felt like a gift, like seeing the sun after months of rain. "What is it, sweetheart?" Isabel held up a drawing. She'd been drawing a lot lately, with Sean's encouragement, and each picture showed a little more life, a little more color. This one showed 4 stick figures, one with long dark hair in a fancy dress, Amanda, one small figure with dark hair holding a yellow brick, Isabel, one figure in the clouds with angel wings and a big smile, Daddy, and one tall figure with silver-touched hair kneeling beside the small figure, Sean. "I drew us," Isabel said proudly. 4 people, you, me, Daddy in heaven and Sean. We're a family. Amanda's throat tightened. She walked around the desk and knelt down to Isabel's level, taking the drawing gently. Her hands trembled. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Isabel hugged her mother tight, and for the first time in 6 months, Amanda felt whole. Not the same whole as before. Richard's death had broken something that could never be repaired, but a new kind of whole, a different family, smaller in some ways, bigger in others. "Can we put it on the wall?" Isabel asked. "Absolutely, right next to my desk, so I can see it every day." That night, after Isabel had gone home with the evening nanny, a kind woman named Rosa who Isabel actually liked, Amanda stayed late at the office. She'd been doing that more often lately, not because of work stress like before, but because she wanted to. Because the office no longer felt like a cold corporate tower. It felt like the place where her daughter had come back to life. She found Sean in the therapy room. He was on his hands and knees, picking up scattered Lego bricks and sorting them by color into plastic containers. He was meticulous about it. Reds in one container, blues in another, yellows carefully set aside because those were special. He didn't hear her come in. Amanda stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching him. This man who'd been invisible 6 months ago. This janitor who everyone overlooked as they rushed to their important meetings and million-dollar deals. This broken father who'd lost everything and had been living like a ghost for 6 years. He wore his Navy janitor uniform still, though Amanda had offered to change his job title, give him an office, make him Isabel's official companion with a professional salary. He'd refused. "I like being a janitor," he'd said. "It's honest work, and it reminds me that the important stuff isn't the fancy titles or the corner offices. It's the people." Sean had wisdom that all of Amanda's education and success couldn't buy. He'd saved her daughter, and in doing so, he'd saved Amanda too. "Thank you," she said quietly. Sean looked up, startled. He started to stand, but Amanda waved him to stay seated. She walked over and sat down on the floor across from him, her expensive designer skirt be damned. "For what?" Sean asked. "For giving me my daughter back." Amanda's voice broke. "For the past 6 months I've watched Isabel transform, from a traumatized child who wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat, wouldn't live, to this." She gestured at the Lego castles around the room, the drawings taped to the walls, the signs of life and joy. "You did that." Sean shook his head. "I didn't do anything special. I just understood what she was feeling." "That's exactly what made it special." Amanda wiped her eyes. "Do you know how many professionals I hired? How much money I spent on experts with degrees and credentials and published books, and none of them could reach her? But you did. In 5 minutes, with a yellow Lego brick, you reached her." Sean looked down at the bricks in his hands. "She gave me something too. A reason to stop hiding. A reason to remember Ethan without drowning in guilt. For 6 years, I've been punishing myself for surviving when my son didn't. But Isabel, she needed me to survive. She needed me to be here. And that gave me a purpose I hadn't had since Ethan died." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The city lights twinkled through the window. The therapy room that had once felt like a prison now felt warm, lived in, full of hope. "I have a confession," Amanda said. "What's that?" "I've been watching you, not in a creepy way," she added quickly, a small smile on her face. "But watching how you are with Isabel, how gentle you are, how patient. How you listen to her, really listen, in a way most adults don't listen to children. You don't talk at her or lecture her or try to explain away her pain. You just sit with her in it. And I've realized something." "What?" Amanda took a deep breath. This was hard to say. Hard to admit that despite all her power and resources, she couldn't give Isabel what she needed most. "You're not just a janitor. You're not just Isabel's friend. You're the father figure she needs. The one I can't be, no matter how hard I try, no matter how many parenting books I read or therapists I consult. I can be her mother, but she needs someone to be her dad. And somehow, without even trying, you've become that person." Sean's eyes widened. "Mrs. Gutierrez, Amanda, please, call me Amanda." "Amanda," Sean said carefully, "I'm honored that Isabel cares about me, and I care about her, but I'm not trying to replace her father. I know that, and I would never ask you to. Richard was irreplaceable." Amanda's voice was firm but warm. "But Isabel needs someone to show her how to build Lego castles, to tell terrible dad jokes, to listen to her talk about her father without trying to fix her grief. She needs you, Sean. We both do." Sean's hands stilled on the Lego bricks. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what family means. Before Richard died, family was the 3 of us. Fixed, permanent, unbreakable. But then he died, and that family broke. And I thought that was it, that we'd be broken forever, just Isabel and me, trying to survive." Amanda looked up at Sean, her dark brown eyes meeting his deep brown ones. "But Isabel drew a picture today, 4 people, and she called it family. And I realized family isn't fixed. It changes, it grows, it adapts. And sometimes the people who become family are the ones you least expect." She'd spent months looking for someone to save Isabel, but in the process she'd found someone who saved them both. Someone who understood grief because he'd lived it. Someone who understood loss because he carried it every day. Someone who could sit with Isabel in her pain without trying to rush her through it. someone who, against all odds, had become essential to both their lives. A year later, Sean stood in Amanda's penthouse living room, watching Isabel play with a dozen other 8-year-olds at her birthday party. The transformation of the space was remarkable. What had once been a cold, minimalist showcase for expensive furniture was now warm and lived in. Children's artwork covered one wall. Photos filled the shelves. Isabel and Sean building Lego castles, Isabel and Amanda baking cookies, the three of them at Central Park. And in the center, in a frame of honor, the picture Richard had loved most. Him and Isabel laughing together. The penthouse had stopped being a museum to Amanda's success and had become a home. Isabel was laughing, running, alive. She wore a bright yellow dress, her choice, because yellow was the color of magic bricks. Her dark brown hair was in pigtails with yellow ribbons. She was playing tag with her friends, shrieking with joy when she got caught, the way normal 8-year-olds do. Sean watched with tears in his eyes. A year ago, this had seemed impossible. Isabel locked in her trauma, unreachable, dying inside. And now... "She's doing so well," Amanda said, walking up beside him. She'd changed too. Her hair was down more often now, in natural waves instead of the severe bun. She smiled more, laughed more. The lines of stress around her eyes had softened. She'd stopped trying to control everything and had learned to just live. "She's strong," Sean said, "like her mother." Amanda smiled and bumped his shoulder gently. "She's brave. Like someone else I know." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Isabel. It had become their routine, these quiet moments of just being together, no words needed. "And you?" Amanda asked softly. "How are you?" Sean thought about it, really thought about it. The grief was still there. It always would be. Ethan's absence was a permanent part of him now, like a scar that would never fade, but it didn't consume him anymore. He thought about Ethan every day, talked to him sometimes, in his head, told him about Isabel, about the castles they built, about the little girl who'd given him a reason to keep living, and he liked to think Ethan would be happy about that Ethan would want his dad to help another child, to be there for someone who needed him. The yellow brick he'd given Isabel, Ethan's magic brick, had done exactly what Ethan said it would. It had made something strong, not a Lego castle, but a bond between two broken souls, a foundation for healing. "I'm okay," Sean said honestly. "For the first time in 7 years, I'm okay. I still miss Ethan every single day. I still wish I could go back and change things. But I'm not drowning anymore. I'm living." Amanda's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his. It was a gesture that had become natural over the past few months, small touches, hands held, shoulders brushed. A connection that had grown slowly, carefully, between two people who'd both loved and lost. "Good," Amanda said, her voice thick with emotion, "because we need you. Both of us." Sean looked at her, really looked at her, at this brilliant, powerful woman who'd been just as broken as he was, who'd trusted him when no one else would, who'd seen past the janitor's uniform to the grieving father underneath, who'd let him into her family when she had every reason to keep her walls up. Somewhere along the way, between the Lego bricks and the terrible jokes and the shared grief, he'd fallen in love with her. Not the desperate, needy love of two broken people clinging to each other, but the solid, steady love of two people who'd walked through fire and come out stronger. "I'm not going anywhere," Sean said, squeezing her hand, and he meant it. Amanda leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched Isabel blow out the candles on her birthday cake. 8 candles plus 1 extra. "That one's for Daddy," Isabel had insisted, "so he can make a wish too." Later that night, after the guests had left and Isabel had fallen asleep clutching her new stuffed dog, she'd named it Ethan, Sean and Amanda sat on the penthouse balcony, looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. "Do you believe in second chances?" Amanda asked quietly. Sean thought about the question, about Ethan, who'd never get a second chance, about Richard, taken too soon, about all the things that could never be undone or fixed or brought back. But then he thought about Isabel, laughing at her birthday party, about himself, smiling for the first time in years, about this family they'd built from broken pieces. "I believe in new beginnings," Sean said. "Not second chances because we can't go back, but new beginnings, different paths, unexpected families." Amanda nodded. "Isabel asked me yesterday if you could be her dad. Not instead of Richard. She was very clear about that. Richard is her daddy in heaven, but she wanted to know if you could be her dad on earth." Sean's breath caught. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that was up to you, and up to me, and that grown-ups need time to figure things out, but that I'd like that very much." She turned to look at him, her dark brown eyes shining with tears and hope. "So I'm asking you, Sean Flores, not as my employee, not as Isabel's therapist or friend or companion, but as someone I care about deeply. Could you see yourself being part of this family? For real?" Sean looked at this woman who'd changed his life, at the penthouse that had become a home, at the drawing on Isabel's wall showing 4 stick figures, a family. He thought about Ethan, who'd taught him that yellow bricks could make anything strong, who'd shown him that love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms, it adapts, it finds new ways to matter. And he thought about what Ethan would want for him. Not guilt, not punishment, not a life lived in shadows. Ethan would want him to be happy, to love again, to be a dad again, in whatever form that took. "Yes," Sean said, his voice breaking. "Yes, I'd like that very much." Amanda smiled through her tears and kissed him, and on the balcony of a penthouse overlooking Manhattan, 2 broken souls found what they'd both stopped believing in: hope, healing, home, and the understanding that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least expect, the invisible ones, the broken ones, the ones who understand that healing isn't about fixing what's broken, it's about learning to carry it together. Sean Flores had lost his son, Amanda Gutierrez had lost her husband, Isabel had lost her father. But together they'd built something new, not a replacement for what they'd lost, but a family forged from grief and hope and love. And in a therapy room on the 30th floor of Pierce Global Dynamics, a Lego castle stood on a shelf. At its foundation, visible through the clear base, sat a single yellow brick, holding everything together, just like Ethan said it would,